Okay, it's 9:25. I think we can start now the lesson. This is the third topic that we're going to discuss for semis, and I think this is the last topic for semis. Last meeting we discussed the short background of El filibusterismo, the reason why Rizal wrote the El Fili, the content of El Fili. We discussed all this, okay, last meeting. So let's have a recap first before we proceed to our topic today about the essays of Rizal. First, what was the inspiration of Rizal in writing the El Filibusterismo, students? Before we proceed to our next topic today, what was the inspiration of Rizal in discussing his El Filibusterismo?
Yung Gombursa po, sir.
Yes, the El Fili was
Sir.
yes dedicated to the Gomburza and also to his family about what happened, yung nangyari yung incident sa kanyang pamilya, that was the abuse that experienced from the hands of the friars during the time. Okay? And then, from the word, el filibusterismo. Ano ibig sabihin ng filibusterismo dun sa sinulat ni Rizal? Anyone? Ano ibig
Sir,
sabihin
ano
ng
po yung question?
ano ibig sabihin ng filibusterismo sa pamagat na kanyang sinulat na El Fili?
During grid po.
Yes? Yes. If we translate this,
During grid in English.
okay, if we translate this in English, it is the reign of greed. Oh, parang kasakiman yung ibig sabihin niya. And I mean dun sa word na na term na filibusterismo. Anong ibig sabihin doon? Ito rin yung naging rason kung bakit niya pinili yung pamagat na El Filibusterismo sa kanyang nobela. Anyone who can recall?
Sir,
Yes?
hindi ko sure kung tama yung pagkakaalala ko, pero base dun sa napanood ko, sabi parang sila yung against sa mga praile.
Yes. Pag sinabi mo ang filibusterismo, it is associated to revolt or you act against the government during that time. Pag sinabi mong filibusterismo. It is rarely known by the Filipinos because sometimes it is forbidden to say the word na filibusterismo. Hindi siya basta-basta ginagamit. Because you might be associated sa mga revolutionista pag ginagamit mo yung term na filibusterismo. That's why Rizal chose this as the title of his novel na El Filibusterismo. Kukunti lang yung nakakaalam ng term na yon at saka pinagbabawal din. And then may kinalaman sa mga Gomburza kasi naparatakan sila. They were accused na member ng mga revolutionista noong mga panahon na yon. Leader ng mga revolutionista. Na it's tantamount pag sinabi mong filibusterismo na term ng mga panahon na yon. Okay? What was the metaphor used in the story of El Fili? Ano yung metaphor na ginamit doon sa kwento? To figuratively describe the story, the content of the ano yung mga yung metaphor na ginamit doon. 'Di ba sa No Limitangere ang ginamit ni Rizal na metaphor din cancer? Cancer sa lipunan, okay? What about El Filibusterismo? Yes?
Vapor Tabo and Pasig River.
Yes. Who is this?
Vapor Tabo na Pasig River. Hope, sir.
Hope, yes. Yes, Metaphor used in the story is yung vapor tabo, no? Na nandun sa Pasig River ng mga panahon wherein sakay-sakay noon yung iba't ibang klase ng tao ng mga panahon ni Rizal na dinescribe niya sa kanyang storya. Perfectly describe niya na yung dun sa vapor tabo na yun, parang nagsama-sama na lahat ng mga klase ng tao na andun yung mga praile, yung mga indio, yung mga mapagmataas, andun sila Doña Victorina, if I'm not mistaken, yung babae na nakapunta lang ng ibang bansa, nakapag-asawa lang, parang naging matapobre yung style. Parang andun, na-describe niya lahat ng mga tao, klase ng tao na nandun ng mga panahon na yun. Okay, so that's it. That's the short background of El Filibusterismo. Now, we're going to proceed to our next lesson about the essays of Rizal, no? Aside from the novel na sinulat niya, meron din siyang mga essay na kung saan it also describes the situation in the Philippines during the time, okay? The essays of Rizal. Okay, objectives of the lesson: discuss the content of the different essays of Rizal and explain the impact of the essay to the rise of the Philippine nationalism. Okay, so these are the two objectives we will consider discussing this. What are the essays that we are going to consider? Our focus today is the Philippine within a century, or the Philippines a century hence. Okay, second, the message to yung movement of Malolos. Pero next na natin yan. Third, indolence of the Filipinos. So ito yung mga essay na sinulat ni Rizal, contribution niya sa literature. Then ang focus natin ngayon ay sa the Philippines a century hence. Okay? What do we mean by century? How many years pag sinabi mong century?
10 years.
10 years?
10 years po, sir.
10 years.
100.
100
years ang century. Ay, oo.
100. Ano ba talaga? 100 or 10?
100.
Okay, 100.
100, sir.
Yes. Decade, pag sinabi mong 10. Okay? Pag century naman, 100. Okay? And then pag millennium, kung hindi ako nagkakamali, is it 1,000 years? Pag millennium, yun na yung pinagsabi ko. Okay? Okay, pag sinabi mo okay, pag century, hundreds naman yan. Kaya, pag sinabi mong 21st century, 18th century, yun yung mga term na ginagamit. Okay? Meron din siyang, di ba, sabi ko na sa inyo kung paano yung technique, kung paano nakukuha yung exactong year dun. Pag sinabi mong 18th century, anong hundreds yun? Anong exactong year? Parang gano'n. Okay.
1700s to 1790.
Yes, magdeduct ka lang ng 1. Okay? Pag kukunin mo naman yung century, mag-add ka lang. Okay? Pag gusto mong kunin yung year, exactong year, magdeduct ka lang ng 1 dun sa century na sinasabi. Pag gusto mong kunin yung yun na yun. Okay? The Philippines within a century hand. Okay? What is the content of the Philippines a century hence? Okay? The Philippines a century hence contain the predictions of Jose Rizal about the Philippines 100 years before its publication. So parang Nostradamus din si Rizal dito. He predicted what will happen in the Philippines after 100 years before its publication. Okay? And then, tama ba yung naging prediction ni Rizal? Okay? He published the essay on September 30, 1889 under the La Solidaridad. Okay? La Solidaridad. Sino yung author nito? Sino yung main author ng La Solidaridad? Hello? He's also the founder of Jaryong Tagalog.
Si sir?
Si?
Marcelo?
Yeah,
Del Pilar.
si Marcelo.
Del Pilar.
Okay. Marcelo H. Del Pilar. Yung pinaka main author ng La Solidaridad. At contributor sila Rizal dito sa paggawa ng La Solidaridad. Okay? What are the main points of the essay? Okay? Using the past to understand the present, thus predicting the future. Using the past to understand the present, and thus predicting the future. One of the essence of studying history ay ito, yung pinaka-core niya kung bakit siya pinapag-aralan yung history. Okay, yun yung significance ng history. But sometimes, we don't care anymore what happened in the past. Lalong-lalo na pag bitero, yun nangyari sa past natin. Okay? What we focus now, kung ano nangyari sa present, yun yung mahalaga. But sometimes, your past can define or describe what will happen to your future. Wait lang, mag-add lang ako ng estudyante. Sino tong late na to? Anong oras na? 9:36 na. Si Melba. Okay. Next, number 2, Filipinos have lost confidence in their past, lost faith in the present, and lost their hope in the future. Okay, the main points of the essay. Third, Filipinos will still be under Spain if they will implement the freedom of the press, and the Filipinos has representation in the Spanish Cortes. If the reforms are not implemented, then the spirit of nation rises, and thus a revolution is highly positive. According to Rizal, ilan sa mga main points niya sa kanyang essay. Now, if you were Rizal na pinanganak noong 1861, and then nag-publish ng libro ng 1889. Exactly 1892, 1894, pumasok yung yung mga Amerikano sa Pilipinas. 18 and then 1939. Yes. Now, ano yung prediction natin? Now, my question is, if you were Rizal during that time, we're asking reform sa kanyang bansa. What kind of reform na gusto niyo namang makamit if you were born during the time of Rizal? Anong klase ng reforma yung gusto niyong makamtan noong mga panahon na yan? If you were born during the time of Rizal. Si Rizal, ang reforma na gusto niya ay magkaroon ng representation sa Spanish Cortes. It's not really the independence of the Philippines during the time, but a reformation. What about you? If you were born during the time, anong klase ng reforma yung gusto niyo mangyari sa Pilipinas? We were colonized by the Spain for 333 years. Imagine kung gaano katagal yung 333 years. Lampas ng 3 century. Kasi 333 years tayo nasakop ng bansang Spain. Can you imagine that? Ilang beses kayo ipapanganak? Students, can you imagine yung haba, span ng colonization ng Spaniards sa Pilipinas for 333 years. Okay? And then, nung panahon na yon, given the chance na naipanganak kayo doon sa mga panahon na yon, what kind of reformation na gusto niyang mangyari noong mga panahon na yon sa Spaniards? Students?
Sir, ako po.
Yes, who's this?
Edward Belen, sir.
Edward Belen, yes. Ano yung
Sir,
reforma?
I think sir, equal rights tapos equal treatment po sa mga Pilipino, sir.
Equal rights and protection sa Pilipinas. It's the same na ginawa rin ni Rizal. Equal rights and protection sa mga Pilipino. Because he also, gusto niya rin magkaroon ng representation sa korte. Kasi hindi talaga justly justified yung treatment sa mga Indio noong mga panahon na yon. Will you agree dun sa idea ni Rizal na na reformation but not independence? Edward? We,
Opo, sir.
yes, why?
Sir, kasi I think nung panahon pa kasi ng Spanish, sir, is parang wala masyadong, tawag nun, kapangyarihan pa yung mga Filipino, sir. So, kailangan muna nilang, tawag nun, step by step po na makamit yung kalayaan, sir, para sa mga Pilipino. So ganun po yung ginawa ni Rizal, sir, na hindi muna independence yung, yung parang, tawag nun, yun nga, sir, reformation muna bago yung sa independence ng Pilipinas, sir.
Okay. So, yes, thank you, Edward, for your, that's a good answer. Okay? We need a step by step. We cannot abruptly go to these changes na dapat maging independent tayo if we are not, especially if we are not prepared dun sa independence na hinihingi natin. Okay? Kung sino may ibang sagot, take note, nung pumasok yung mga Spaniards sa Pilipinas, year 1521, 14th century. Ay, tama ba? Hindi. 16th century, tama. 16th century. Okay, 1521 pumasok yung mga Spaniards sa Pilipinas. And then pinanganak si Rizal 1861. So 19th century. So 16th century and then hanggang 19th century ang hinihingi pa rin na pagbabago sa kanyang bansa ay reformation. Hanggang 19th century. Do you think it's not enough for the span of 16th up to post 19th century for us to seek the independence of our country during that time? Sino may ibang sagot? Anyone? Hello? Students? Just nag-ano lang ako, nag-wonder lang ako. Kung nag-start pa ng 1521 yung colonization, and then still, pagdating ng 19th century, still looking for a reformation sa ating bansa. Bakit kaya nagawa yun ni Rizal na reformation until 1961? Okay? Hindi ako anti-Rizal. I'm just wondering, curious, why? What happened during the span of 1521 to 19th century? And Rizal, an educated propagandist, ay nagsisik pa rin ng reformation hanggang 1861, hanggang 18 blah blah, hanggang 19th century. Noong mga panahon na yun. Why? Are we not yet prepared for the independence that we want for our country? And is that the pagtawag dito? Ganun ba kalala yung pagsakop ng Spaniards sa ating bansa? We were really controlled during that time. And para na nga, sa sinabi na nga niya sa The Philippine Centurions na essay niya, dun sa first part, Filipinos have lost confidence in their past, lost faith in the present, and lost their hope in the future. Okay? Somewhat true. If this will be our basis, magmula 1521 hanggang 19th century, may kapatunayan tong isinulat ni Rizal. Okay? So that's it. Just a question dun sa nangyari niya. Next, the Philippines within a century. This essay published in La Solidaridad starts by analyzing the various causes of this misery suffered by the Filipino people. Okay? And then, what are these various causes of misery suffered by the Filipino people? And then, first, Spain's implementation of military policies. Ito yung mga pag-aabuso na nangyari sa mga Pilipino sa kamay ng mga Espanyol. Because of such laws, the Philippine population decreased dramatically. Okay? Poverty became more rampant than ever and farmlands were left to wither. Okay? Just like the Jews during the time of Hitler, mula sa 9 point something or 7 point something million population, halos 2 to 3 million lang natira. And then during the time of the Spaniards in the Philippines also, nag-depopulate din tayo. Okay? Nag-decrease din yung population natin because of the abuse by the Spaniards. Pag nagkamali ka sa daanan, nakita kang nagnakaw, pwede ka lang barilin. Or you might be sentenced to death without any trial. Okay? So, anong nangyari sa Pilipinas noon? Nag-depopulate din. Poverty became more rampant than ever and farmlands were left to withered. Okay? The next, the family as a unit was neglected. Okay? The family as a unit of society was neglected and or every aspect of life of the Filipino was retarded. So take note, every aspect of the life of the Filipino was retarded. Second abuse, deterioration and disappearance of Filipino indigenous culture. What do we mean by this? Deterioration and disappearance of Filipino indigenous culture. Students, ano ibig sabihin nito? Deterioration and disappearance of Filipino indigenous culture.
Sir,
Yes, who is this? Speaking.
appeal po.
Apil. Yes, Apil.
Sir, since po kinolonize po tayo ng Spaniards po, doon na po nag-start na mawala na po yung Filipino culture. Kasi po sa mga religion po na in-instill ng Spanish sa Filipino noon, pati po yung other cultures.
Yes. One good question again, Darif. What if hindi dumating yung mga Spaniards kaya sa Pilipinas? Ano kaya religion natin ngayon? Anong religion natin? Or what might be our traditional clothes na ginagamit? Is it Maria Clara? Or not? Baka iba. It's tantamount na mas malaking proportion according sa mga stories ang mangyayari sa Pilipino kung hindi dumating yung yung mga Spaniards sa Pilipinas. Baka Muslim rin yung natin, Islam yung religion natin sa Pilipinas. Kasi during time before pa na pumasok yung mga Spaniards, mas unti-unti nagpropagate ang population ng mga Muslims sa Pilipinas. Sa part ng Mindanao. And then hanggang sa Luzon, may mga Muslim din. Pati sa Luzon. Luzon sa part ng Manila, centralized yan na mga control dyan ng mga Muslims noong mga panahon na yan. Malamang sa malamang, there's a high tendency na we are Muslims nowadays. And hindi Kristiyano ang Pilipinas. Hindi malawak yung portion. Ano lang naman pumasok yung religion na Christianism because of the Spaniards sa Pilipinas. Okay? Pero yung mga naunang nagpropagate ng mga religion, I think it's yung group ng Islam. Na stop lang yung pagpropagate ng Christianity ng Islam sa Pilipinas because of the Spaniards. I don't know kung yung nauna. Yung date, kumagal ko sa history, may time na pumunta si Abu Bakar. Abu Bakar sa Pilipinas noong mga time na yan. Don't know kung nauna siya pumunta sa Pilipinas or yung mga Spaniards. I forgot the date kung ano kasi. Pero malamang sa malamang, dati pa naman, mayroon na mga Muslim sa Pilipinas, part sa mga Muslim. And then that might be the traditional culture na meron tayo, hindi Maria Clara. Kung papansinin mo na yung Maria Clara, it's not really a traditional clothing na atin talaga yon. Spanish pattern yung damit. Parang yung damit, kung papansinin mo, talagang Spaniards yung niya, padating niya. Don't know if that's such your observation. Hindi siya pure Filipino na galing pa sa ating mga ninuno talaga. Yung Maria Clara. Okay? Next. The question then arises as to what had awakened the hearts and opened the minds of the Filipinos with regards to their plight. Eventually, the natives realized that such operation intercepted by foreign colonizer must no longer be tolerated. Okay? So, out of this, yung mga pangyari sa kanila, sa mga Pilipino nito, paano nagkaroon ng kamalayan na rin yung mga Pilipino to fight for their freedom, to fight for their rights during that time. Okay? Paano out of this abuse, sa mga Spaniards during the time, paano nagising yung kamalayan ng mga Pilipino? First, andiyan na rin yung mga propagandista. Okay? Although andiyan yung mga propagandista, ano pa kaya yung nagpagising sa mga kamalayan ng Pilipino? Yung mga propagandista, yung mga sila Rizal, sila Andres Bonifacio. One question Rizal raises in this essay is whether or not Spain can indeed prevent the progress of the Philippines. Can Spain indeed prevent the progress of the Philippines? Kayang-kaya bang pigilan ng mga time will come, hindi talaga. If the Spaniards will continue the oppression, malamang magwawala yung tao na yan. And time will come talaga na makukuha niya yung freedom niya. Kung patuloy yung abuse, wala naman taong gustong lagi inaabuso every day. It's like the Black Americans. Time will come na magkakaroon talaga ng magbabago at he will voluntarily seek. Though he was blinded sa mga ideology na to ng mga colonizers, time will come na you will seek talaga dun sa change, pagbabago na gusto yung mangyari. Okay? Keeping the people uneducated and ignorant had failed. Okay? National consciousness had still awakened and great Filipino minds still emerged from the rubble. First, keeping the people uneducated and ignorant had failed. At saka, during the time of the Spaniards din naman, hindi naman lahat ng mga Spaniards ay malupit talaga. Katulad na lang ng mga teacher ni Rizal, mga pari lang din naman doon yung naghubog ng kanyang kaisipan. And then, meron din mga governor general na mababait at liberated ng mga panahon na yon. Okay? Although the Spaniards during the time controlled the education. Dapat insulares lang yung pwede mag-aral. Yung mga Indio hindi dapat mag-aral. Pero, nung pumasok yung mga liberated governor general, they were allowed na mag-aral. Kahit nagkakaroon ng discrimination, many Filipinos still nag-strive sila na makapag-aral ng mga panahon nila. Katulad na Rizal, nila Del Pilar. Okay? Next. Exterminating the people as an alternative to hindering progress did not work either. The Filipino race was able to survive amidst wars and famine and became even more numerous after such catastrophes. To wipe out the nation altogether would require the sacrifice of thousands of Spanish soldiers, and this is something Spain would not allow. During the Spaniards, mas malaki naman talaga yung population ng mga Pilipino. Kaya lang, marami yung yung mga Pilipino na kung mas marami yung population ng mga Pilipino, konti lang yung mga Spaniards. So, dapat nasusuppress ng mga Pilipino yung mga Spaniards. Ano nangyari lang kasi, mismo mga Pilipino rin, yung mismong protekta sa mga Spaniards na to at ginagamit ng mga Spaniards. Kaya hindi na nangyayari yun. Kahit pa million versus thousand mangyari, maraming mga makapili na mga Pilipino during the time, okay? Spain therefore had no means to stop the progress of the country. What Spain need to do is to change the colonial policies so that they are in keeping with the needs of the Philippine society and the rising nationalism of the people. Sabi dito sa The Philippines within century hands ni Rizal, kung continuous yung oppression na nangyayari, yun nga, time will come na magkakaroon ng change. Na magsisik voluntarily yung mga tao. Parang magsasawa siya. Parang gano'n. Na time will come na gusto niyang kunin na yung pagbabago na gusto niyang mangyari sa kanya The Philippines within a century hence. Which is true naman. Na-predict naman yun ni Rizal. Nagkakatotoo naman yung kanyang prediction sa kanya The Philippines a century hence. But, sabi ni Rizal, if the government of the Spain will change their system, colonial policies, ang sabi niya, baka patuloy pa rin na yung mga Spaniards yung may hawak, may control sa Pilipinas. Do you agree? Students? Hello? Andiyan ba kayo?
Meron, sir. Yes, sir.
Dalawa yung side ni Rizal. Sabi niya, kung continuous yung oppression, time will come na kukunin ng mga Pilipino yung kanilang independence. Pero pag magbabago naman yung colonial policies nila, baka patuloy pa rin yung reign or pag-control nila sa Pilipinas sa mga panahon na yan. Is it true or not? What do you think? What will happen?
Agree ako with Rizal, sir.
I agree. Why? Why? What are your grounds or reasons why?
Kasi sir, kung babaguhin po nila yung mga policies nila, kasi may tendency po na parang mag-a-agree na lang po yung mga Pinoy. Parang friendly, ay parang, ayun po, mag-a-agree sila with each other basta okay lang yung policy ng Spanish po. While pag magpatuloy pa rin po yung hindi po fair na justice sa kanila, talagang magpapatuloy po yung mga Pinoy na magalit po at mag-seek ng reform sa society.
Yes, okay, that's true. Pero the idea of Rizal the idea of Rizal, pero may totoo yung yung sinabi ni Rizal. Yung 333 years, kung bakit pa nagkaroon ng 333 years na colonization, imagine how many decades, how many century yun nangyari na nagtagal yung colonization nila sa Pilipinas. Hindi naman magtatagal yung isang during the 1521 hanggang 17th century, no? Maayos naman talaga yung pamumuno ng mga Spaniards sa Pilipinas. Liberated pa sila. Kaya lang pagdating ng 18th century, yan na yan. Marami yung mga peninsulares na pumasok sa Pilipinas na they are not in good government, yung nila, side nila. Kaya nagbago. Kaya mas lalo nagsumiklab yung uprising revolution ng mga panahon na yan. Okay, pero sa history natin, walang bansa na naging dominated na hanggang ngayon ng mismong nag-colonize. Every country had their way na para makuha yung independence nila. Parang they all seek yung independence nila sa kanilang bansa na palayasin itong mga colonizers na to. Sa Cuba, ano ba yung mga bansa? Sa India, na nag-colonize. Sa China, ganoon yung situation doon. Lahat ng mga bansa, siningi nila yung That's why it's quite idealistic na yung Spain magtatagal sa Pilipinas ng infinite. It's quite idealistic yung yung idea ni Rizal nung mga time na yun. Pero nagtagal siya ng ng 3 century yung time na yun. Next, Rizal concludes, the advancement and ethical progress of the Philippines are inevitable, are decreed by fate. The island cannot remain in the same condition. Okay? Sabi ni Rizal, sa kanyang The Philippine Centurions, the advancement and ethical progress of the Philippines are inevitable. Kumbaga, nakatakda na talaga mangyari ito at hindi ito maiiwasan, and are decreed by fate. The island cannot remain in the same condition. Okay? Everybody, lahat naman nagbabago. May changes talaga nangyayari. And it is inevitable. Pag hindi ka nag-grow, ano kayang meron ka? Ba't hindi ka nag-grow? Okay? It's not normal anymore if you will not grow. And you will remain stagnant in life. Everybody make a changes or meron pagbabago nangyari. Okay? And it's inevitable. Even the condition of our country during the time, it is inevitable. It is decreed by fate. Okay? And it will not remain in the same condition, sabi nga ni Rizal. What Rizal had envisioned in his essay came true, yung kanyang essay. In 1898, the Americans wrestled with Spain to win the Philippines and eventually took over the country. There was a reign of democracy and liberty. 5 decades of Rizal death, the Philippines gained her long-awaited independence. This was in fulfillment of what he had written in his essay. History does not record its annal any lasting domination by one people over another, of different races, of different usages and customs. of opposite divergent ideas. One of the two had to yield and succumb. Okay? One of the, nasabi sa kanyang, parang concluding part sa kanyang The Philippines Within a Century or as a Century Hands. Political conditions of the Philippines during the time of the Spanish colonization. The political condition during the time. First, there is a dominance of the friars over the decentralized colonial government. Dominance of the friars during the time, it's not really the government yung may control sa Pilipinas. Parang nagiging theocracy yung government sa Pilipinas. Kung anong sasabihin ng friars, parang sinusunod din. They were influenced sa mga friars ng mga panahon na to. Kaya may church intervention ng mga panahon na yun. The Spanish government was deeply indebted to the Catholic priests in the process of colonization and the pacification of the Filipinos. And because of the great role played by the church in the colonization, they were given rights to intervene in government affairs. But do you think it is the same situation na nangyari sa Spain noong mga panahon na yan? Students? Ganun ba yung situation ng government sa Spain noong mga panahon na yan? So the government was also indebted sa church and they allow it to intervene sa kanilang government, yung sa kanilang pamumuno ng mga panahon sa Spain. Hello, students?
Hindi po ako sure pero parang
Yes? Come again?
parang hindi po ganun, sir.
Yes, that's true. Hindi siya talagang ganon. Sa Pilipinas lang naman nangyayari yung theocracy na pamumuno ng mga friars sa Pilipinas ng mga time na yan. Because during the time, the church were halos ano na sila. Ni-execute sila sa Spain. And they confiscate the properties of the church yung mga panahon na yan. Okay? And then during the time, yung mga Spaniards sa Pilipinas, yung government ng Spain ay gusto nang tanggalin yung intervention ng mga pare sa Pilipinas ng mga panahon. Gumawa lang sila ng way para maibalik yung posisyon nila sa Pilipinas, yung kolonya. Kaya maraming mga abusive priests mula sa Spain ang lumipat sa Pilipinas noon. Okay? Ang ginawa nilang paraan noon ay yung secularization. Pasensya, may mga manok dito. Magkakaroon sana ng secularization sa Pilipinas. Yung mga native priests, sana yung magiging mga leader na noon sa Pilipinas. Kaya lang, ginawa nila ng issue. Okay, yun yung issue sa Gomburza. Kaya napaigting ng mga friars yung kanilang pwesto sa Pilipinas doon. Kasi sinangkot nila yung mga native priests, Filipino priests noon sa Pilipinas. Kaya naisip ng Spain na ibigay na lang yung posisyon nila yun sa Pilipinas. Okay, next. The political condition of the Philippines during the time of the Spaniards. The dominance of the Principalia in the colonial government. Okay, Principalia. The Spanish colonial government set a qualification for the natives to be part of the election of the gobernadorcillo of each town such as follows. Male, 23. In the mentioned qualification, those who were qualified to vote and be elected were those who belonged to the higher class of the society, and the native who belonged to the Indios did not have a right to participate in the election. Dapat nasa middle class ka or yes. Sila Rizal, nasa part rin to na nasa Principalia rin sila. Creoles, mga part na to. Na pwedeng tumakbo, magbumoto sa Pag Indio, hindi pwede. So there is a discrimination. The appointment of underqualified officials in the colonial government in the Philippines. Yes, even though you are not qualified sa position na yon, sa pagiging gobernadorcillo, ay na-elect ka due to the powers of the friars ng mga panahon yun. Due to the distance and the Spaniards needed to travel, the qualified officials for the colonial government did not want to be assigned in the Philippines. Okay? And most of the officials who were assigned in the country were corrupted and used the funds of the colonial government to their own advantage. Okay? Ang ginagawa rin, si Viceroy from Mexico, nagpapadala lang ng representative sa Pilipinas. Na ito naman to, parang bagong gahaman sa kapangyarihan. Next, the reforms needed by the Philippines, according to Rizal, as stated in his works, representation of the Spanish Cortes. Okay, magkaroon na the governors assigned the Philippines tried to implement reforms using the law created by the Spanish Cortes. But according to Rizal, those reforms implemented were not suitable to the Philippines because the body who framed the laws belonged to the different culture, and the only way in order to have a law suitable for the Filipinos was to have a Filipino representative in Spanish Cortes. You might not understand kung anong culture ng mga Filipino kung yung mga Spaniards lang yung leader, member ng Spanish Cortes, tapos walang mga Pilipino, iba pa rin yung ano niya, representation nila. Yung side ng mga Pilipino hindi na napapakinggan sa korte. And nagkakaroon ng ethnocentric ideology pag gano'n yung nangyayari. Okay? Next, the knowledge of the Spanish government in Spain. Kakatayin na kitang manok mamaya. Okay? The knowledge of the Spain government about the situation of the Philippines was limited to the reports of the Spanish officials and friars, which according to Rizal was not a true picture of the Philippine society during those times. And as he stated in his essay, okay, during the time, they were only the basis ng Spaniards sa panahon nito sa central government sa Spain ay yung mga reporta ng mga friars. And the fact na yung mga friars na to ay parang pag nag-report siya, maganda yung nangyayari, pero yung nangyayari ay hindi. It's the opposite nangyayari sa Pilipinas during that time. Next, according to Rizal, the racial discrimination was one of the reasons why Spaniards did not want a Filipino representative Spanish Cortes. But according to Rizal, laws do not require skin color nor perfect nostril. Another is the discrimination na kailangang ma-wipe out. Kung gusto mag-stay ng mga Spaniards, yung colonial government nila ay isa ito sa dapat kailangan tignan. Tanggalin yung racial discrimination. Next, magkaroon din ng secularization. Kung lahat ng mga ito ay kailangan secularization meaning the appointment of the Filipino priests, native priests sa mga kura paroko, mga simbahan, sila yung magiging head doon. Hindi na yung mga peninsulares. Okay? Or yung mga yung mismong mga pare ng mga Espanyol. Next, the abolition of the power of the friars over a state. Yes, tanggalin na yung power, intervention ng mga friars sa Pilipinas. And then next, reform in the administration. Reform in the administration in all branches. Corruption of the government. And their decisions would be in line with the friars. For instance, the resignation over... Okay. Corruption in the government, yun lang. Para mas madali maintindihan. Next, the needed reforms. First, the basic freedom and Bill of Rights of the Filipinos should be granted by the government according to Rizal. Okay? Basic freedom or the Bill of Rights of the Filipinos during the time. Needed reforms. Needed reforms meaning, ito yung mga dapat kailangan ng mga Pilipino na kailangan ibigay ng mga Spaniards. And then, the equal participation of the Filipino and Spanish in the government, involvement of the Filipino, and the elevation of moral standard of the administration. Okay? And then educational system, reform in the educational system. And the effects of the educational system, according to Rizal, were first, too much emphasis on the religious subject in all areas of educational system. And there was no academic freedom. Mas marami yung oras ng religious subject. Just a question. If religion is one of the important na tayong mga tao na kailangan taglayin, why is it's not included in our curriculum nowadays? Well, in fact, during the time of Rizal, yung mga Spaniards, ang pinaka-sentro ng subject nila ay more on religion. Bakit sa ngayon, hindi na religion yung ano. Halos wala nang religious
Sir,
subject. Yes?
sir, I believe that religion must be innate to everyone nowadays, and it is included to our curriculum. And I believe
I believe what?
hindi na po kailangan ilagay sa curriculum yan kasi dapat po nasa sa atin na yun kung paano natin i-deliver or isagawa yung pananampalataya natin sa Diyos.
It should be innate in our, as a human being. It should be our, ano na yan, imbibe na yan.
Natural. Though may
Okay.
mga atheist po, atheist.
Okay, yes. Because religion is a political ideology. It cannot be, ano, it's really hard na i-integrate yan sa curriculum pag sa kasalukuyan na. Pag nung panahon pa ni Rizal, okay pa, kasi siya namumuno. Mga pare, of course, it's okay. That's why yung pagtuturo ng religion dapat in private yan, katulad sa mga private universities. Kung gusto mo magturo ng religion, you create your own school and create your own, yun na, pagpatay ko ng sarili mong school, katulad ng St. Louis, mayroon yung theology, St. Paul, mga private institution na lang. Pero pag public na mga eskwelahan, hindi talaga i-include yan. Kahit pa dun sa elementary. It's a political reason. Political na education should be open and free to all. That's why magkakaroon kasi ng problema. Hindi naman lahat ng tao ito yung gustong marinig sa teaching, sa scripture. Paano pag may Muslim? Ito na nga yung problema. Paano pag may Muslim na estudyante, meron kang ganitong sect na estudyante, yun na nga, mag-aaway-aaway lahat yan. Imagine kung ano mangyayari sa classroom mo. Baka hindi matapos yung isang oras na klase mo sa maayos na maraan. Okay? It's a politically, yung idea ng religion political reason yan. Kaya hindi dapat ilagay sa curriculum niya. Kung gusto mo ay sa private na lang. Okay? May belief kasi yan na hindi mo pwedeng ipilit. Rights niya yan. Nakalagay rin yan sa Constitution. Rights ng tao yan. Sa yung politically freedom niya na piliin yung kanyang religion. The next, freedom of press. Rizal, as he stated in his essay, the Philippine Century Hands was that since the Philippines was far from his Spain, it was necessary to have a freedom of the press so that this freedom would protect the people against the abuse of the officials and the friars. Okay, freedom of press, yung gusto rin sa mga reforma ni Rizal. Kasi during time, yung diaryong Tagalog na ni Marcelo H.L. Pilar, I think inabot lang siya ng 4 na buwan tapos ipina-shutdown na ng government. Hindi pwede yan. So, the rights were curtailed noong mga panahon niyan. Kailangan magkaroon ng freedom of press, sabi ni Rizal. Then, yung mga knowledge niya, LPLD, pinaban rin. Hindi pwede i-publish noong time na yan. Kasi against sa mga friars noong mga panahon niyan. And the knowledge of the king about the Philippines was limited to the reports, yung kanina. However, the fear of rebellion because of freedom of press is contrary to the ideas of Rizal because according to him, the freedom was not necessarily the same with the independence, and if the Spanish government would grant the Philippines necessary reform, this may come to pass within 100 years. And then sa linya ng kanyang The Philippines a Century Hands, this may come to pass within 100 years. Okay? The Philippines will try to defend its liberty secured at the point of so much blood and sacrifice. Okay na nagkatotoo dahil sa revolution. The new men will spring from the soil. They will labor together to strengthen their fatherland and strive to enter freely upon the wide road of progress. It all came through sa kanyang The Philippines Century Hands. So, ganun yung intelihente ni Rizal, yung intelligence niya. He can predict what will happen in the future. Na nagkatotoo nga sa kanyang essay. Okay? The company will revive the maritime and merchant life and once more free. Like the bird that leaves its cage, like the flower that unfolds to the air will recover the pristine virtues that are gradually dying out and will gain again, become addicted to peace, cheerful, happy, joyous, hospitable, and daring. This may come to pass within 100 years. Okay, dun sa kanyang sinulat na The Philippines a Century Hence. Okay, that's the story of the Philippines a Century Hence and how Rizal predicted the future. I don't know how we will like conclude the lesson. Okay.